In East Germany, there was a compulsory period of military service, so if you're 18 and you were a man, you were essentially drafted. Well, Rudiger Knetchel was one such young man. He went into service in 1960. So 1961, he is stationed in Berlin at the spot where the first victim had been shot. And people from the western side of the wall could see where he was. So he's standing there and people are yelling over, "Were you the one who shot him?" He'd look around to see if there were any other officers or anyone there. He says, "No, and I wouldn't want to." But as he is standing there with this gun in his hand that he didn't particularly want to have in the first place, he had to make a decision, would he fire? If a friend of his was then trying to make a break for it and happened to cross at that place where he was stationed, would he fire at them? And he looked into his heart and decided, no. And he was so convinced of that he talked to the other men in his company and said, what if we all either refused to shoot or shot to miss? How would anyone know? And wouldn't that be really in accordance with our own conscience? Shouldn't we do that? So they made a pact, all of them, except one, to do exactly that, to either shoot to miss or not to shoot. Well, at some point, the one who didn't join their pact ratted them out, and he was hauled off, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison, simply for that decision not to shoot. While he was in prison, the Stasi worked on his wife, and who had a young son with him, convinced her that because he was a criminal now, that they could never have a life together. So the day that he's finally released, he comes home, he had Christmas presents, and comes to a home where she has essentially begun a life with someone else, and he loses not only his wife, his freedom, but everything that he had hoped for all that time in prison. He then became someone who chronicled the stories of people who had been oppressed by the Stasi, who had been lied to, who had been forced to do things that they didn't want. And he did this throughout the rest of his life, actually, and became one of the leaders in the peaceful revolution that culminated in 1989 in Germany. By chronicling the stories of victims of the Stasi, which he ultimately had published in the West, he then began to have death threats. One of them called and said, "I'm not going to kill you, but I am going to throw acid in your eyes and you will be blind for the rest of your life." He continued undeterred and was one of the voices for freedom, for autonomy, and for a life free of Stasi intimidation.